This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Good evening, my friends. I hope you had a wonderful holiday, and I hope that you have a great new year. I can't believe that we're coming up to 2019. It is absolutely crazy. I remember when it was the turn of when it was 2000, and I had a gig. I was singing a lot, and I sang downtown at the Hotel Monaco, and had a big swanky party there, and it was a great gig, but I'd always wished that I was not working at the turn of the 2000. It was one of those things. It was pretty fun, but I wish like I said, wouldn't have been working. But I hope someday that I will be able to get some music out to you. I've been regrouping with my band. I can't wait to do that. We're going to be putting together a jazz ensemble, and we'll play around town, do some recordings so I can get back to that. But in the meantime, I am having too much fun researching UFOs, making connections, and finding people more often than not who have really gone underground because they understand that this field, at least in a public sense, is tainted. Not only do we have people that are basically inept at what they're doing, leading the way, but also people who have really large egos or maybe really fragile egos, and people who might be disinforming the public for whatever reason, but we have a lot of ineptitude. It is my hope that through this show and through speaking out publicly that I can bring to you people that have made a difference, that have been there decade after decade doing the hard research, and oftentimes none of you have heard about these people. Tonight, we're going to hear from somebody that has made significant contributions in New Hampshire. He hasn't done a radio interview for over a decade. Thank you to Barry Greenwood for helping me arrange this. And in the words of a couple people that I love and trust, I am speaking with Peter Jeremiah, who is the king of New Hampshire with regard to all of the UFO research. He has been at this for a long, long time. He's kind of pulled back from the subject. He was the former state director for MUFON, but was there for the Betty and Barney Hill case. He can tell us about the 1974 flap over New Hampshire, which was very unusual. We've got the President Bush sightings, much, much more that we're going to talk about. And the coolest thing that Barry Greenwood was telling me is that Peter would go around and lecture people, and he would have a great presentation where he would have a photograph of the location, but then different projectors that would show the object, the UFO, on the photograph, and it sounds like an absolutely incredible thing. Before we started the show, he was mentioning that he would do about 12 lectures a year, and they would all do them free of charge as a service to educate the public, and how things have changed. But we're going to hear all about the history of New Hampshire and Peter's work. So Peter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
I am excited because meeting people like you teaches me so much about how to be a better investigator and about some of the pitfalls that you've been through and the things. We had a great conversation the other day, and I know that we both have, interesting frustrations about things, but I want my audience to know about your life and how you first got involved with all of this.
Well, that's an interesting story. I knew a lieutenant colonel way back in the early 70s who was interested in the subject. I had no interest in it, but he invited me to a lecture in Massachusetts to a researcher who was lecturing a local group on a case he was working on, and his name was Ray Fowler. Ray is no longer investigating, but it piqued my interest, and it kind of like grew on me, and before you know it, I was doing it too.
What a great thing. I have in my library several books that Ray Fowler wrote, and it would be wonderful to get him on my show, but for you to be there when he was giving that lecture, it must have just raised the hair on your arms. I know it would have done that for me.
Yeah. Well, what was interesting, the lecture was interesting, but I was kind of more interested in the people who were at the lecture. There was probably 15 or 20 people there at his home. And, there were Raytheon engineers and teachers and, people who you would not think would be interested in the subject. And that kind of impressed me quite a bit.
And so did you talk with Mr. Fowler?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we had a nice conversation and, asked questions. He was briefing us on, I believe it was the Allagash case that he was working on. I got to meet a couple of his fellow workers. One was a hypnotist and another researcher. It was a very positive meeting, and on the way home, I was telling my friend, I said, well, it sounds to me like this is fairly serious.
And so what happened after that? Where did you go, and how long did it take you to really dive into this?
Well, at that time, there was no MUFON investigator for New Hampshire. It was being handled by Ray and another guy from Massachusetts. And a sighting came up that they needed to have investigated, and they asked me if I would do it. And I said, well, okay, I'll give a shot, and I did it, wrote up the report, sent it in, and the next thing you know, I had joined MUFON, and I joined NICAP, and I joined every group that was out there. And I was sort of like appointed the state director, and there was no turning back. 20 plus years was what I put into it.
And so you were obviously there when you joined NICAP. I mean, when the organization was infiltrated, as some people will say, or things went awry. Can you remember any of that, or did you hear any stories?
Well, I was reading, I read all of the monthly bulletins that they would send out, and of course, through the grapevine, you hear the stories about how they were infiltrated and their data was lost, and it was discouraging, but Walt Andrus kept on running his organization, MUFON, so, I was doing fine. I got to read the manuals and all of that. It was an interesting time to see what was going on in the subject.
And so when you became state director, how many other state directors were there at that point in time?
In the country?
Mm-hmm.
I do not know.
Okay.
I do know that Walt Andrus was quite pleased that I took over the state of New Hampshire, and we generated a group. We had, I think, probably 5 or 6 section directors I had working for me. Over the years, we generated quite a few sightings. We also, towards the end, we started having yearly symposiums where we had all of the national speakers here. We had Gordon Cooper. We had, all of the big names in UFO research. Our mantra has always been, or was, we are a nuts and bolts investigation organization, and we tried to stick to that when we did our investigations and we wrote up our reports.
And so who are the other people besides Walt Andrus that you interacted with and can tell us about? Because I always think the people connection is so fascinating.
Well, all of the speakers that we had were all fascinating people, and most of them were about as down to earth as you could get, and they brought forward a very, very interesting part of the subject, from abductions to research on physical traces and that kind of thing. And of course we were all learning as we're going along. We didn't have the operational manual in our hands.
So when obviously you're at a meeting, you listen to Ray Fowler. He's talking about this sighting and giving a lecture, but how did you feel about some of the humanoid cases, some of the abduction cases?
I never was really a big fan of abduction cases. To me, that was a little bit far afield of nuts and bolts. However, talking with the people over the years who say they've had an abduction experience, it was, quite obvious that something happened that really shook them up. But I left the abduction cases to Ray and the rest of the guys. I stuck with my nuts and bolts here.
And so have you ever personally had a sighting?
No, I have not. I'd love to. I've been asked that question 1,000 times, and my standard answer is no, but I sure would like to see one.
Maybe tonight's your night. Stranger things have happened. Have you ever, a lot of people who are really nuts and bolts don't want to, or they feel that addressing the paranormal with regard to all of this is something that shouldn't be done. What are your feelings about addressing some of that with your investigations?
Well, I would never do that. I mean, I have, in all the years I've been doing it, I never ran across it here in New Hampshire, but I'll leave that to some other researchers. It's an interesting part of the equation, but it's not my cup of tea.
Well, and then I think all of us have things that we gravitate towards, and I think there's so many areas, so many places that we could go with all of this, and sometimes it does become overwhelming. I know when I visited Norway and was talking with Erling Strand, who's lead in Project Hestel, and he mentioned that as a scientist, they had to pick what data that they were really going to hone in on, because they simply just couldn't look at all of it, especially if they were trying to get funding. You have to be pretty controlled with what you were doing. And so I really, that's an important point. As much as for me, having my own personal experiences, I know that there is a paranormal aspect, and I don't know where one begins and the other ends, but maybe it does make it cleaner for research purposes to just focus on, a portion of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I know that in my case, we're not funded by anybody. We're all volunteers. And so we could do what we needed to do without fear of, losing our funding or that kind of thing. I have to admit, I spent a lot of money for MUFON. But it was worth it, and it was very nice to be insulated from all that. And surprisingly, which is, I didn't expect this. Surprisingly, many of the police officers and that we run across were sympathetic to the subject, but were not openly willing to admit it because of the political impact that it would have. That's kind of disappointing, but they were very good to me. Most of the police officers in the state of New Hampshire were very, very good to us as a group. When we had our lectures, they would sometimes attend, sometimes they would be there to make sure nothing unusual happened, you might say.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because you just brought up a memory in me. I mean, I've had several people in law enforcement, that I'm friends with that have approached me and offered me information or different things, but have been very guarded, and that's unfortunate. And I almost wonder if it's become a little bit worse now and not better, but I don't know.
I really don't know. It's like an Air Force pilot reporting a UFO. That would shoot his career right in the foot. And so, if one came down and paced his plane, he'd be absolutely crazy to report it because of the stigma that's attached to, that type of thing. And that's the way it was back then. And I have no reason to think that it isn't now.
It almost seems like it's become more convoluted, and there's so many. I mean, everybody's got a platform, and there are lots of, YouTube.
Right.
YouTube has given rise to a whole new generation of people that can make up things and steer people down the wrong path and make the subject look even more ridiculous than it looked 50 years ago when the government was trying to ridicule the subject.
Yeah, that's true. I know that as a group, we've had some potential witnesses get really upset with us who had these weird situations that they were trying to get publicized through us. And when we wouldn't follow through with something like that and say, well, there's nothing here for us, they would really get upset. And you find that out there, I think, now more than ever. But, they do have an outlet where they can get on Facebook and all of that, and vent their their whatever out to the general public.
I'm so happy about that, because I'll tell you, if I didn't read Facebook and see some of the great comments that people make, my life would not be complete. That's for sure.
I'm sure.
So, what a waste. I mean, half the time it's just you think, okay, A, who are you? You're probably a fake profile. And B, it's why am I wasting my time? It really is it spins us around, and it's unfortunate. But I have to ask you, so you got involved, you became state director. Do you remember specifically what the first case you investigated was?
That's ancient history, but I believe one of the first cases that I did, it didn't involve any nuts or bolts, but I was approached by a teacher, and I'm kind of talking out of turn now because she lived in the state of Maine, so I probably shouldn't have done it, but she approached me, and so I agreed to do the interview, and I interviewed her and her husband in their home in Maine, just over the border here, so I didn't drive too far. And that was the case where I was telling you about an orange ball of fire, or an orange ball of light, came down and did a terrain following movement all around the property boundaries of their land. And it shook her up quite a bit, and she had to do some research to find me. And when I spoke with her, you could tell it was kind of like she's trying to get this off her chest because she can't figure out what in the world would do that. And, she was looking for answers. And that was probably, if not the first one of the first cases that I did way back when.
Wow. And so when you look at how many, and I know that we discussed this, but this would be good for our listeners, when you look at all of the time you were in New Hampshire, did you have a lot of these balls of light cases?
No, not really. We had, I'm trying to think. Maybe 2 or 3 over the time that we did it. There was one particular case that involved a set of lights. It was in the southern part of the state. It was a set of lights that kind of did a terrain following through the town and into the next town, and saw by multiple witnesses. That was a pretty interesting case. There was the police officer case that was out in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm trying to think. We had another one that took place way up in the northern part of the state by the Blackwater Dam. That ended up actually being a craft hovering over the road, but it started out as a ball of what looked like fire in the woods. All interesting cases, I must say.
Oh, I would love to see your reports on these cases.
Yeah.
Maybe I can twist somebody's arm.
Geez, somebody you know may know that.
Well, I might have to find out. That would be
good.
I love looking back at this because it's, I look at what I'm doing here in Utah, and then I look at what has taken place historically in New Hampshire, other places,
right.
In the country or the world. And it's like, it's mind-blowing how many similarities, commonalities there are.
Well, exactly. And I think I mentioned to you that I started writing a book because I wanted to document what was going on. And after, several chapters, I said, my God, I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again, just with different people in different places. And so, it's a phenomenon that takes place worldwide. And there's really no answer to what's going on other than either one, all of the governments of the world are in together trying to keep this a secret, and it is actually an extraterrestrial thing, or they're all in it together because they've developed these craft that they don't want people to see. I don't believe that one, but when you look at the data worldwide, it's almost the same.
It is, and I think the more I research this, the more questions I have, but I really wonder if a lot of religious, I think this poses so many important questions, and I just wonder sometimes who has really had a vested interest in shutting down this topic.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know.
The standard answer to that one is, well, if we were to come forward and say that we have been visited by extraterrestrials, and don't worry, they're kind, nice people, that the religious community would go up in flames. I kind of don't believe that. I know that the government loves to see UFO-related stories here and there when they're flying their black aircraft out there, because it kind of has a little cover for them.
Absolutely, I love it. I want to talk more about that when I get back. I'm Erica Lukes, here with Pete Jeremiah. Stick around. The best is yet to come.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving using Zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code RADIO10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
Close. I don't know what's more dumbass, him losing his license or that this was on the front page of a major news outlet.
It's a huge story, and of course we're going to cover it here on Three Guys No Ties.
It's not, but it looks ridiculous, and so you want to look. You clicked on it, right? We got it, don't we? I saw the same thing. As soon as I saw it on your computer screen, I wanted to see what that story was. So it's even newspapers are doing clickbait.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. A lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
That's just one adoption story that started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
It's great! I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great!
The Fenton Files, where it's all connected.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Come explore a universe full of possibilities. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. The Fenton Files. Go where no other show has gone before.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there.
Whether it be UFOs, aliens, conspiracies, or even consciousness, your host, Lorian Fenton, has a file for that. The Fenton File. Fenton File. Fenton File. Your journey to the truth is but a file away. Live, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The Fenton Files.
Incredibly intense.
Where truth is just waiting to be discovered.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here and look in chat, see all of the familiar faces. Doug Down Under, Gabe, Jeff, Northern UFOs, Lib, Joe. Phil, thank you so much for being here. And Corey, who's listening in, I will ask your questions. I appreciate you spreading information out about that show. And if each of you could take the show's link from tonight and maybe post it on your social media feeds, I would love that. I would appreciate it. I think it's important with all of the nonsense out there now that we get people who have really contributed to this field, get their names out there, preserve history. Barry Greenwood is teaching me so much about that, and I'm grateful to him. I want to say that because he is definitely mentoring me, and it's a wonderful thing. I am here tonight with Peter Jeremiah, who resides in New Hampshire, and for 20 years dedicated his life, along with his wife, who we're going to talk about too, because she did great things to support her husband. He was with MUFON and investigated a lot of really great cases. And Peter, I've got a question in chat. When you joined MUFON, was it at that time the Midwest UFO Network?
I'm sorry, say that again, Eric. I didn't quite hear that.
So when you joined MUFON, at that point in time, was it called the Midwest UFO Network?
No, it was not. It was always MUFON.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. That's what I was thinking. We've got another question. Corey from Skype wanted to know if you did any investigations into the Andreessen affair, considering that Ashburnham was on the New Hampshire border. I'm reading half of the question here, but.
Right. The answer to that is no. Ray did a fantastic job of researching that, putting it all together. And it is quite interesting, but no, I had nothing to do with it.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So you were talking about, when we left off, some interesting cases, the Blackwater Dam, which I want to talk to you more about, the Orange Ball of Fire, and we'll do that when hopefully I can chat you up next week. I would really love that. That would be great. But, also, you were talking about some of the cases that you investigated and got into. I know that the Betty and Barney Hill case was pretty big on your radar. Can you tell the audience how you first got involved in that and what the timeline was?
Sure. Actually, to tell you the truth, I stayed away from that case for a long time. I read all the literature. I talked with several of the people that, were intimately involved. Betty lived in Portsmouth at the time. And I think it was probably 2 or 3 years into what was going on, my investigations and that kind of thing, before I actually got to meet Betty Hill. Talking with her, I was able to put together a slide presentation that I used throughout the state. And found her to be a very interesting lady. And the documentation that they have on the case is irrefutable. It's nuts and bolts, just like I like it. That case is just something else. It took the heart of the people. They just loved that case, and I think it probably was because of the quality of the people involved and the investigation that was done by the people involved doing it. It turned out to be a very good case.
It really was. I mean, that broke a lot of ground for.
It did.
For the younger. Go ahead.
You bring out an excellent point, and that is that all of these other cases that you read about worldwide had not been publicized, and the Betty and Barney Hill case brought it out the first time. And so, they didn't have a playbook to go by, and so the information that was brought forth in that case was brand spanking new, and of course it went worldwide, as you know.
And for some of our younger listeners, because I know that we have some from all over the world, and they don't understand the gravity of the Betty and Barney Hill case, can you give us background on the case and what took place?
Yeah, basically, what happened was Betty and Barney had gone up into Canada on a vacation. They were coming back. They're from driving at night, and they spotted this light in the sky that seemed to be pacing their car. Barney stopped the car to see what was going on, walked across the street, and this light came down, and it turned out it was actually a craft. And he was able to take his binoculars and look into the windows of the craft and saw entities kind of looking back at him. Well, that kind of got him nervous. And he ran back into his car, and they continued down the road. And the drive from where they were to where they had to get here in Portsmouth normally takes X amount of time, and they had used up 2 or 3 times that amount of time when they arrived. And they couldn't figure out why it took them so long to get home. And Barney was having some medical issues, and Betty had some dreaming issues, and so they decided to go for medical help to see what was going on, and they eventually went to see a hypnotist, a world-renowned hypnotist who had worked with the military, taking care of soldiers and that kind of thing, and so he hypnotized Betty and Barney separately on many occasions. And the story that came out from that series of hypnotism sessions turned out that their car was stopped. They were taken out of the car and brought aboard a craft that was parked in the woods up in New Hampshire. Betty was given a physical examination. Barney was given a physical examination. The information about the physical examinations that both of them were given was not heard or seen from any place else in the world that we know of until it was brought out under hypnosis. And so when that was known that it was actually an abduction case, and it was a craft on the ground, several investigators got involved in it, a couple of primaries and a couple of secondaries, and eventually a book was written laying out what happened on the trip. The interesting part about this was that the details of the physical examinations were not known worldwide until this happened, and then once this came out, we find that the same thing has been happening worldwide. So it's kind of like a flagship case as far as I'm concerned.
And it was very interesting to look back and see the way, the media gets a hold of this, and then there's this frenzy. And I remember hearing Betty in an interview talking about how overnight, they could be walking down the street and people were glomming onto them. And then with the sudden notoriety, there was this, they were very susceptible to skeptics and to people that really had nothing better to do than to maybe ridicule them. And then you throw in the fact that they were, they had a lot of things going on. They were an interracial couple, and that was, for that time period, very, that was something that was a difficult thing for them.
It was, very much so. But on the other hand, they also made some very long-time friends, people who were very sympathetic. As a matter of fact, Betty told me that she used to have lunch with some of the colonels out at the Air Force Base, and they would ask her questions, and she was very friendly with them. Unfortunately, Barney passed away before I had a chance to meet him. I never did meet him. I would have loved to talk with him for a while. But yeah, it was, but it's interesting. I don't know how Barney took that ridicule, but I do know that it was just water off a duck's back when it came to Betty. She could care less. It was one of those, I know what I saw, I know what I did, and that's it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be one thing if you came out and said, I saw a UFO, but then to have all of these other things taking place. And, I mean, it's, you've got everything. I'm in shock and awe. And I think this is an important case. And I want to just mention when I went up to the Special Archives at the University of Utah, that is, they house the collection of Dr. Frank Salisbury. And he had a lot of files and a lot of correspondence between he and Leo Sprinkle, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, about this case. And so that was really fun to go through and read that.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of going with Stanton Friedman to Boston University Special Archives and got to see personally John Fuller's notes that he took while he was writing his book, and also seeing some of the notes that the hypnotist had written down, and it was really something to see the private notes that they wrote. If this is the case, I'm out of here. That kind of thing, where they were trying to keep their feet firmly on the ground while reporting on what was going on. It was fascinating.
That would be fascinating. John Fuller is somebody that I have several of his books in my collection, and one of them has to do specifically with Dugway, which is in my backyard, and the sheep incident. And so he was a very interesting author, so that would have been really fascinating to see his notes on that.
Yes.
What a cool thing. And so you have... Betty, you became friends with Betty, and what sort of legacy did she leave for you? I hear that you might have a really cool picture of her.
Well, I have a very large picture of her, black and white picture of her, which is quite nice, and that was given to me by one of the members of my New Hampshire MUFON group, who was a photographer. Quite nice. The legacy would be, I guess, it would be that when an individual is subject to what Betty was subject to, the turmoil and all of that, it leaves an impact on them that really affects them for the rest of their life. And I think Betty was negatively impacted by what happened a lot more than most people realize.
And that it's sad, and I wish, I don't know, I see so many people, as you have in your career, that are just impacted by this, and you've got no one to turn to. And then if you do turn to an organization, a lot of times you're led down the wrong path, and it's just a very, it's fraught with a lot of landmines once you have an experience.
It is. And I can't tell you how many times when I sat down in the living room of these people that have seen, not the light in the sky, but the people that have seen something up close and personal, I cannot tell you how relieved they are to be able to speak to somebody that doesn't think they're crazy and is taking interest in what happened to them. And then, of course, one of the things that we try to impart to them is that, listen, you had a rough time, but nobody that we know of has been hauled off the earth and carried away, so you're going to be fine. And that's a big relief to them. This woman that I mentioned to you that had the ball of fire go around her property, she used to come to every lecture that I gave in New Hampshire. She'd be there. And she would be one of the people in the line after my lecture was over, my slideshow presentation was completed. I'd stand there, and as long as it took, there'd be a line of 20, 30 people, and they'd come up and ask me a question. She would ask me a question every single time because you could see how interested she was in the subject. And it bothered her to the point where she just had to find out everything she could.
Did she ever have any other experiences that you know of?
No, not that I know of. It was her and her husband. Interesting enough, her husband was not all that enthusiastic about talking about it, and I'm sure that she was the one who initiated the initial call. And subsequently, when I would talk with her at these different lectures that I would give in the area, she would ask me very good questions, but she never volunteered that they had any other experience.
That must have been a remarkable thing for you to know that you made a difference like that. And I have to say, there are people in MUFON and out of MUFON, and people who care about this subject that give people support. And a lot of times we're kind of thrown into this, and a lot of us aren't scientists, but we have to wear a lot of different hats, a therapist, an investigator, all of these, a scientist, and it is an incredibly difficult task. So that must have been a really gratifying thing for you.
Yes, it was. I have to say that whenever we ran across an individual who obviously needed help, psychiatric help, or some kind of help in that vein, we were very fortunate to have a couple of people in the group that were therapists or were psychologists that would help, and they would volunteer their services to these people. And so we were able to direct them to somebody free of charge to get it off their shoulders and try to get on with their life.
And that's great.
That in itself was very gratifying.
That's wonderful. And I have to ask you, because we're talking about Betty and Barney Hill and hypnotic regression. And
right.
Nowadays, I think we see a lot of people that come into this that take maybe a weekend workshop in hypnosis. And
right.
They're out there subjecting people to this, and probably more often than not leading a witness. And so
absolutely.
What are your thoughts about that before we go to break? Because I think that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, my thought is they should all study what Dr. Simon did with Betty and Barney Hill. He when he did his regression, it was textbook, and stay away from those backyard hypnotists is my firm belief. It'll get you nothing but trouble.
And I have to say that probably there are people that are very that want to do their best, and they're trying to help people. And I think sometimes in a subject like this, where a lot of us, unfortunately, our belief systems bleed into this. And so we try to impose our belief systems on other people. And that's a hard thing not to do. And so how do we know if we're finding an investigator that is truly unbiased, or a hypnotherapist who is unbiased? That's a hard thing. If you have any recommendations, I would love to know.
I have none. All I know is that as a volunteer group, we appreciated whatever help we got, and we always made sure that the individual who volunteered the services to us was reputable. And that's as far as we could go. You have to realize that if the person is volunteering their services as a psychologist or what have you, they have to have an interest in the subject in the first place. So they may be a little biased, but what can you do? I would say that just about 100% of the time, the people that we turned over to them came out of it a lot better off than they were before.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I hope that we can really kind of push good researchers out there, good hypnotherapists, and I would love to maybe find some names of people that we can reach out to help people. Maybe we can do that collectively. because I think, like I've mentioned before tonight, that there's so many people who are capitalizing on this and coming in and preying on the belief systems or the fears or different things and trying to spin their own narrative to make them more popular. And that's been kind of a shocking thing for me to see in ufology currently. But did you think you had that as much when you were researching this?
I don't know what's going on now because I'm out of the subject for 10 years, but it was going on when I was involved. We had a pretty large group here in New Hampshire at the time. We had at one time the highest membership per capita in the entire United States for little old New Hampshire. So we had a lot of people. And you did see that. And, we did the best we could to steer people away from that type of individual, but they were out there.
Well, yes, and it's interesting, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. And again, I wanted to tell my listeners about you, Pete Jeremiah. Is there any place that anybody can go to really read up on your work?
Not really.
Okay. We're going to work on that.
We did our free lectures and we did our symposiums here for 8 years running, and that's basically it.
Well, I'm glad that people can hear about your work, and there are a couple cases that I really want to focus on, Keene, and then also just to talk about the President Bush, the unknown things that flew over Kennebunkport. It's fascinating. And then also the 1974 flap.
Yeah. We had quite a group here. We had sightings everywhere. Some of them were real. Some of them were misinterpretation, as normally is the case. But it kept us busy.
Well, I'm excited to hear more about that. And so we've got 1 minute to break, but you are not researching this at all right now.
None at all. I'm completely out of the subject. MUFON did not understand the meaning of volunteer. And what they did to many of the old-time investigators was absolutely abhorrent. And I dropped the organization like a hot potato, and I have nothing more to do with it.
And I had a similar experience, as did Elaine Douglas, who I took over for, and we can talk a little bit about that because that's important. It's sad to have good people discouraged. I'm Erica Lukes here with Pete Jeremiah. We will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I'm Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here on KCOR. Start out Friday evening on a good note. I want to give a big shout out to Tina Marie, who's a great station owner, producer, and for all of you tuning in every week, getting into chat, asking good questions, and being a very respectful community of people who truly want good information. I mentioned in the first half of the show that if you could take a link from tonight's show and share that on your social media, that would help tremendously. Let's get the word out. Let's honor people who have done so much for this subject and make sure that we are moving forward with a knowledge base, so we're not being persuaded by the likes of some of the secret space program people. I won't go into that one. That's another story. I am here with somebody who is a veteran in research in New Hampshire, Peter Jeremiah, dedicated 20 years of his life and was in a very, very active state. One of the biggest chapters in MUFON. At one point in time had 5-section state directors. And I mean, some of the cases, the Betty and Barney Hill case, all of the things that you shared with us, Peter, in the first half, that was really incredible. And when we left, we were talking about the 1974 flap that took place. So tell our listeners what happened specifically in some of the good cases.
Well, that would be a little difficult for me to do. You have to remember, I just got involved with MUFON back then at that time. But what we had Ray Fowler and another fellow by the name of John Oswald who did the research up here in New Hampshire. They had many sightings all around the seacoast. I live here on the seacoast, and we have an Air Force base here. It used to be Pease Air Force Base, and it had bombers and tankers and, a full-blown Air Force base. And they had sightings all over the place back in the swampy areas around the base, up in the mountains. They had sightings. It kept those two guys pretty busy, and unfortunately, MUFON at that time didn't have a large cadre of people, and so probably a lot of the cases that took place never got investigated.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I've got a few reports from 1974, thanks to Barry Greenwood, and I will get those out there because they are very curious. And I know that let's flash forward here to the Zeller case, because that was a case that you investigated and you told me about, and it is fascinating.
Yes, that was a case that started off kind of slowly for me and ended up being one of the best cases that we had a chance to investigate here in New Hampshire.
So give the audience, tell the audience about the case.
Okay. There is a town in the western part of the state called Keene, New Hampshire. And they have a very active police department there, nice building, nice equipment. And one night, a call came in to the Keene PD, unidentified caller, said, "Hey, you ought to investigate this light that's hovering over this field." And the dispatcher, took the sighting information, and it just so happens there's a fellow by the name of Jack Zeller, who was a patrolman at that time, was on duty, and they assigned the case to him. When I spoke with him, he says, I wasn't in any big rush. I figured it'd be something easily identifiable. So he jumped in his cruiser, and he drove out to the one of the roads that bordered this open field area. And when he got there were several cars pulled off to the side of the road, and these people were standing out of their cars, and they're looking across this field. And at the other end of the field, there was a light just hovering there. No sound, not flashing, it was just on. And so he got out of his cruiser, and he's talking to the people there, and one of the people said, "Why don't you try to shine your light on it?" And a cruiser will have that very powerful spotlight on the outside of the car. So he turned the spotlight on and moved it up and got it so that it was shining right at the light. And as soon as he did that, the light started heading towards him. And it continued at a slow pace, lowering in altitude to about 50 feet above the ground, and continued right towards him. He noticed a Buick car pulled up on the side of his cruiser, and he thought that was his supervisor. And so he didn't pay any attention to it. He just kept the light on this thing. It eventually, slowly, passed right over his cruiser, and he had the bottom of it lit up like daylight. The craft was like a boat. It had lapstrake siding on it. The color was a pinkish white. And just as it got over the cruiser, it made a sound. It made a two-tone hum, sort of like, ha, continued across the road and stopped, rotated, stayed there for, I think he said, 20 or 30 seconds, and then instantly moved down in a southerly direction about a half a mile, hovered over a motel there for another few seconds, and then slowly did a terrain following towards the town of Winchester. So at the time, I'm talking to this patrolman, and I said, "Well, do you have any witnesses?" And he said, "No, because I thought my supervisor pulled up in the Buick, and it wasn't him. It was somebody else's car." And everybody dispersed because the thing was gone. So I asked him what mainly impressed him about what he saw, other than the fact that it made no sound. And he said, "Well, I studied acceleration, deceleration." He said, "This thing went from here to over that motel instantly." He said it just was like there. And it stayed there, and then it just slowly, terrain followed away. He said, that bothered me quite a bit. He said, of course, the fact that this great big thing was like a 35 feet wide, 35 feet long and 15 feet wide, was flying at 50 feet above the ground and not making any sound. Another question I asked him, I said, well, how do you feel about making a report about this? And he said, I have no problem. I know what I saw. I don't care what other people say. And that impressed me quite a bit. He was a no-nonsense guy who saw what he saw and told me what he saw.
What an incredible case.
Yeah, it's a great case. It's, if you had to pick out a case that had all, the fact it made a sound and made it a CE2, which means that it interacted with the environment in some way, that is a gangbusters case. Unfortunately, we didn't have any other witnesses besides him, so it's a single witness case, but you couldn't ask for a better witness.
Did you ever talk with him after you investigated the case?
No. We did the case. We went back to the PD, and I broke out my tape recorder, and we went over the whole thing again, and that was the last I talked with him. Although I understand that subsequent to that, several other people interviewed him about the case. I have no idea if he's still at the PD or what.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. When you were involved in research, did you ever feel like there was a point in time where you knew that there was government involvement?
Well, I have one case where there's no doubt there was government involvement. A young man that I knew had an up close and personal sighting. He told me about it. Unfortunately for him, he told a bunch of people about it. And he lived in an apartment by himself. And shortly after he had his sighting, he had a knock on the door. And two guys came in dressed in suits. And they asked him all kinds of questions about his sighting. And this concerned him greatly because, he read the literature and all that. He knew about these men in black and all that. So when they completed their talk and they were leaving, he went out and he wrote down the license plate of the car they were driving in. And they drove away. And so he came to me and he said, look, this is what happened. And he didn't want to tell anybody, now all of a sudden it's all super secret. I did some research on the license plate number. And it turns out that the car those two guys were driving in was a GSA rental car out of Manchester, New Hampshire, which means they were some kind of a government entity, because those are the only people that I know of that can check out a GSA car. So that's government intervention, I believe.
And so do you wonder, because the more I learn about this, the more I understand that obviously there would have to be monitoring of the community because, for obvious reasons, not only are we dealing with something perhaps extraterrestrial in origin, something that could threaten our country, but then you also have the testing of top secret things, and then other governments wanting to get involved and infiltrate organizations to find out what people are seeing. And so what was your take on that? Which do you think that would be? Why would they be monitoring this fellow?
Well, Eric, this guy was shaken to his boots, and he wouldn't tell me who he talked to, if he had called the police department or what. He wouldn't tell me who he actually talked with that got these guys to know that it was him. So it's difficult to go any further with it. But I'll tell you, he was shaken right down to his boots, and I don't know that he told me all the truth about what happened, about who he told and who he talked with. But obviously he got the ire of somebody.
I have a person that I know here in Utah who has been on some of the TV shows, and he goes out and he's right on the border of military installations, and I know that he's had some visits from people, and that's simply because he's testing, or he's observing top secret military craft, and it's like, oh dear, sometimes it's sometimes you just have to know that you're treading on dangerous territory and you shouldn't go there. But your case is interesting, and I wanted to ask you, you had a case that involved a crop circle.
A crop circle?
So I'm looking at the list of your cases, and there was one, 1993. The witness was Graham in Ashland.
I think that was a case in which I was called out, and they felt there was a crop circle, and I went out there, and there was no evidence that I could determine that was a crop circle. It looked to me like what somebody had done is they were out camping, and they matted the grass down to the point where it might have looked like a crop circle. That's the only crop circle I can recall.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened towards the end of your time at MUFON, because you volunteered 20 years. And I think it's difficult in a volunteer organization. You've got so many different personalities, but at the end of the day, each of us spends our time and our money, and we do this for the betterment of mankind, I think. And so tell us what happened when you left.
Well, actually it's 20 plus years, but as I was here at home, and I received a phone call from one of the MUFON board of directors, I think. And he warned me that if I didn't straighten up, they were going to take my access to the MUFON computer where I would put in the case records. Interesting enough, he didn't elaborate as to what I was supposed to do. And I after the phone call, I said to myself, I don't think MUFON understands the terminology volunteer. I'm volunteering my time, all of my effort, my money, and they're threatening me. So maybe a couple of weeks later, and I continued using the MUFON website to input data, another phone call from another person who I think was a board of directors guy, I'm not sure. It was essentially the same conversation. Straighten up or we're going to pull your pin. And then I get a letter from this Jim Carrion character saying that I am no longer the New Hampshire State Director. And at that time, I said, actually, before I got the letter, I said, I'm done with this organization. They don't know what the hell they're doing, or they've been infiltrated. And that's the last I had anything to do with MUFON, and nor do I intend to have anything to do with them in the future. Unfortunately, I was not the only one. They managed to rub out, or I should say, take out of the organization many of the long-time investigators that did so much to promote the organization in the past, and they just got rid of them also. So I have nothing more to do with MUFON.
And so who were the other investigators?
Say again, please.
So who were the other investigators that happened to with you?
Oh, you mean in our group here?
Yeah, that were fired by the powers that be.
Oh, I don't know that any of them were fired or if they just dropped out on their own. All I know is that when I got that letter, or actually before I got the letter, when I got the second phone call, I just stopped all work for MUFON and dropped it like a hot potato. Had nothing to do with anybody else in the organization.
And so was that the point when you just decided to walk away from all of it?
Yes.
Was that hard?
Because, I don't think they realized how much time, effort, and money we spent promoting their organization and getting the information out to the people. I don't think they cared. And I said to myself, if they don't care, I don't either. And that was the end of it.
And that, for me, when I resigned as state director, and basically was, in my opinion, pushed out of the organization by a handful of people, that was a very painful process for me because I felt like I cared and I was making a difference. And I wanted to help people in my area, and I wanted to help the organization. And then you do so much and you just think, whoa. And I did that. Why now?
Yeah, I agree with you. I felt the same way. And it's unfortunate as to what they did. My question to you is, what reason did they give for wanting you out of the organization? Did they tell you something?
You know what happened? It was really interesting. I was working under Jan Harzan. I was doing the emails for the statistics reports and for all sorts of things above and beyond trying to resurrect a defunct MUFON chapter in Utah after Elaine Douglas and that debacle. And I had some really great cases, and I was working on the communications team and trying to do my best to give MUFON a new face and repair some of the bad PR and things. And there was a certain woman who came into the organization who I fully believe didn't like that, and a couple other people that were helping her do things that were not incredibly good. I had an American Airlines case, Flight 434, with radar data, and according to Bill Puckett, who did radar on the Stevensville case, this case was much bigger than Stevensville. My case was one of the top 10 cases of the year, and a certain person in MUFON actually listed my case as one of the top cases of all time. And so it was a really important case, but unfortunately things happened and the case was pushed down, and then there were other things involved, political things, really nasty things, and I turned to leadership for help, and that didn't happen. And so after my American Airlines case, that my assistant state director and people involved weren't acknowledged and things, I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be involved in an organization that doesn't behave ethically or professionally, and appreciate what I have been through and what I'm willing to do on behalf. So that's my story. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm Erica Lukes here with Peter Jeremiah. Stick around and we will be back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1-hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the last segment of our show. It always makes me sad to know that the show is coming to an end because I have a great time talking to people. And before we went to break, Peter Jeremiah was asking me what happened specifically to make me resign from MUFON, and that was one of those experiences, as I know it was for you, Peter. It was painful. For me, it was like almost like a death that I had to go through because I had invested so much time and emotion into trying to make an organization better, and that clearly didn't work. But I'm happy that I'm still here. And with you'd made the decision just to walk away, and you were telling me on break you had a lot of other things going on in your life, and it was almost like a relief to you.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I the thing that bothered me the most was that it was obvious they wanted me out of the organization, but they didn't tell me why. I had they threatened to take my pen, never explained to me why I had to go. So when I left, I just dropped it like a hot potato. And, I was building 2 houses at the time, very, very busy working. And it was sort of a relief, that I didn't have to spend my 27-hour day. After that happened, I continued to get phone calls from, the local groups that I used to do the free lectures to, because there was a good fundraiser for them. But I dropped them too. I refused to do anything, and I just am totally out of the subject now. It's amazing that I'm talking with you.
You know what? I feel so honored that you're doing that. It's been such a great conversation, and it's important for people to understand what it takes for somebody to do this. This isn't just like a fly-by-night, I'm going to do this and have a good time. This is for people that really get in there. This is blood, sweat, and tears. There's a lot of money that we invest, and you are very lucky that you had a partner that was supportive of you with regard to this. And I want you to talk a little bit about your wife and how much she supported you, because that's really cool.
Well, it was. We decided that as a New Hampshire MUFON organization had grown to the point where we felt we needed to do symposium. And so I had several volunteers in my group that were helpful. They would drive speakers from the airport and that kind of thing. I got on the phone and called everybody I could think of. We ended up having all of the premier UFO investigators, and we even had Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, here. We had Stan Friedman, all of them. But the person that held it all together was my wife. I am not a well-organized person, and she is, luckily. And so we ran a symposium for 8 years running, served 3 different type of meals to over 200 people each year. She kept that all straight. It was a huge help to me because I didn't have to worry about that.
Well, and that's really awesome. It's hard to find somebody that is supportive, and that's one thing that you hear a lot from people in the field is if you don't have a spouse or a partner that is of the same mindset, then your relationship is doomed. Oh, absolutely. It's especially working with the subject of UFOs, where there's a great deal of hard feelings. You're a nutcase and that kind of thing. And when other people talk to you and say, well, what are you doing with this MUFON group? And you explain to them what's going on, sometimes they turn away. This guy's a crazy guy. Plus the fact that you are dealing with such a vast array of different personalities all through the procedure. It's quite the thing. My wife Fran was a huge help, and she kept the paperwork straight, and I tried to keep the people straight. And that's wonderful. I love that. That's a very cute UFO love story, I must say. And so, what you decided to make that break, and I've heard from a couple other people who have researched this, and then they decided to do the same thing that you did, that they've lived incredibly happy, productive lives, and maybe leaving this field was the best thing that they ever decided to do. I mean, it's an interesting thing, but when you look back on your time doing this, what were some of the most memorable and important experiences that you had? Well, as I had mentioned before, one of the things that affected me the most was to see the relief on the faces of the people that saw something up close and personal, not the light in the sky, but up close and personal. Talk with them, get them to get it off their chest, and in quite a few cases, once you make the initial contact, you get the report, they tell you everything they want to tell you. They don't want to talk to you anymore. They want to forget it, and that to me was very important. We were able to help a lot of people that way. In being able to educate the general public on what is really going on, and we don't have an alien hiding behind every tree, that kind of thing, and the personal interactions with the people that attended the lectures. As I mentioned, after I finished a slide presentation, which usually ran an hour or so, I would spend probably 30 minutes or more answering questions. People would line up in a line, and they'd come and ask 1 or 2 questions, and I would stay there until the line was complete. And that was gratifying too, because these people were not nutcases. They were asking serious questions, and most of the time I was able to answer them. And so when you started to investigate this, and both you and your wife said, okay, we're going to do this, what was something that was shocking as far as the way you were treated publicly because of your pursuit of this? I would say the overwhelming acceptance of what we were doing, especially when we made it perfectly clear that this was a nuts and bolts organization. We're going to investigate cases, and we're not going to be speculative. We're not going to be, out in the tule bushes making up stories. And what
what that did was it took the people that were interested in the subject, really appreciated what we were doing. And I can't tell you how many people really, really appreciated, came up, thanked us, God bless you, you're doing a great job, I appreciate hearing what you're telling me, that kind of thing. That probably was one of the nicest things about it.
And so if you were to give a younger person coming into this subject any advice, what would that be? This is a loaded question, but just anything is great.
That's loaded with a 12-gauge shotgun shell.
Well,
Well, all right. I'll lay it on the line. Be wary of the charlatans out there that are publishing books and writing stories and just have nothing to back up what they're saying. They may believe it, but that doesn't mean it's true. And unfortunately, I'm not a Facebook, Twitter, or any of that kind of thing, so I can't speak to that in depth. But I know there's a lot of that out there. I can give you a case where I was asked to investigate a family abduction. And I took my assistant director with me. We went and talked with the lady. And she had multiple pictures that she had drawn. And she had a little girl was abducted, and she was abducted. And they had all the marks to prove it. And there was no evidence that anything like that took place. So my feeling was, and I told her at the time, well, I don't see anything here that I can make a report on. And I left. And she decided to go to the media, wrote a book, and became a UFO abduction expert. That is terrible, because the people that she came in contact with would probably be well served to stay away from her. And for a young person getting involved in the organization like this or like MUFON, I would say be wary of those types. Read the literature from the old heads. A lot of the old heads' literature is really nuts and bolts and right on target. And I can say I have one observation. I have a relative who's kind of like in the psychological end of things, and she said, Peter, if you think the person is crazy, they probably are. And I kind of went with that.
I like it. That's very simple and very sound advice.
Yeah, she says, you know what a hair on the back of your neck stands up when you meet somebody and they're not what they're supposed to be? That's about the same thing.
Yeah, and that's great. And I've got somebody that just sent me a question and wanted to know really quickly about the Stratham case.
About the what?
Is it Stratham, the case involving 8 kids?
I don't know about that one.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Okay. Well, that's okay. I mean, that's one of those things. And so, if you are telling somebody, now we're going back to the investigation thing, and somebody is like myself, when I came into this, I wasn't a scientist, and I am assigned to go interview a witness or collect trace evidence. What would you say would be the most important? Like if you had a toolbox to take with you, what would you take?
Well, first of all, I would have a high-quality tape recorder, and I would inform them that our entire conversation is going to be on tape and record everything. Secondly, you want to, if there's a physical trace, the first thing you have to do is preserve the trace. Take photographs, do whatever you have to, but preserve it. And go from there. The MUFON handbook that we used to use was quite thorough, and it did a good job of telling the investigator what they needed to do. I found in some of our cases, when you walk in the door and you introduce yourself and you show them your ID and you explain what you're there for, and you're usually there because they called you, not, you're not doing cold calling, and you tell them that you're going to tape record everything. In our cases here in New Hampshire, we considered all cases as confidential and therefore did not release any of the names or addresses of the people that had the sightings. We may use the sighting information on our lectures, but the people involved were never identified. And make that clear to the individual that you're going to talk to. And it's been my experience that if you sit down and just have a nice talk, don't be authoritative. Just be a friendly person and ask your questions. And I highly recommend having a set of 15 or 20 questions written down so you don't forget them. And when you ask the questions, you ask the basic question, any follow-up questions, you watch the person that you're talking to, and you get it all on audio tape. Once the investigation is all over with, you go back and you review the audio tape and make your written report. If you do that, you can't go wrong.
And so are there any other, because now we've got so many gadgets that we can use in the field, and so we've got the infrared cameras,
sure.
We've got all, all of these things, and I mean, is there anything, I think sometimes that is great, and doing field research is important, and to me that is where we need to focus our energy. But when you're going out and interviewing witnesses, I mean, like you said, the best thing that you can do is have a tape recorder.
Absolutely. There's so many nice, compact, portable instruments that you can have. I mean, we used to carry a Geiger counter, but that's kind of like old hat now. As much of that technical equipment that you can handle is a good idea. Now, what I did here in New Hampshire, if I had a case that involved something that was technically out of my field, we usually had a volunteer or a member that would be able to take over and do that part of the research.
And so do you feel, and I know we talked about this a little teeny bit the other day in our conversation, but do you think that there are specific areas where these objects are manifesting or attracted?
Oh, sure. Here in New Hampshire, it changes. Sighting activity changes. As I mentioned, in the 70s, early 70s, we had all kinds of sightings around Pease Air Force Base here, which is on the seacoast. We had a batch of sightings up in the North Country. We had some sightings in the western part of the state. And you never know when it's going to happen. You could sit here for months with no sightings at all, and then all of a sudden you'll get 3 or 4 sightings in a specific area. So it's, it changes.
And so so if you wanted to have a UFO sighting, obviously you do because you've never had one, what would your ideal UFO sighting be if the mothership were to come down tonight?
Well, I'd go shake his hand and ask him what he's doing here. That would be wonderful. There's nothing in the literature, in the investigative reports that I've seen, that they mean us any harm. If Betty Hill would have told you that. But I guess seriously, I would just love to have it up close and personal with some physical traces and have my cell phone camera running and get it all recorded. That would be fantastic.
Wouldn't it be perfect? And I mean, you've seen enough, and you've investigated enough, and you've talked to so many witnesses. Do you have any doubt that there is something extraordinary going on?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the way I usually put it at the lectures is, if all of this that's going on is somebody's imagination, we've got a nation and a world full of crazy people. I mean, that's basically it.
And you don't think that there's any way, because we're now hearing that that this is a threat and that we should be concerned. And there is I think a small faction that wants to instill this terror in all of us. And you look at some of the TV shows that are coming out, and it's all about the alien invasion, or some of the, all of this. I don't know. I think it's propaganda. I'm not quite sure. But I mean, do you intuitively, after looking at all of this, and you've said that you don't think it's a threat, but do you think this is extraterrestrial in origin? If you were to just go out and on a big, just take a leap.
I do. If it isn't extraterrestrial, our government has some fantastic pieces of equipment. The Blackwater Dam case, it's just, the Jack Zeller case. How can you explain that? There's no way to explain that with our knowledge of our technical capability at this time. So, what are you left with? Either the government has this fantastic equipment that they're flying around showing off, or it's extraterrestrial. I mean, what else could it be?
Absolutely. I love that. And I wish that you were still researching, but I'm happy that you are enjoying your life and that you've made such great contributions. And I really honestly look forward to talking to you again and just picking your brain and just becoming your friend.
Anytime, sure. I'd be happy to talk.
I love that. And thank you so much for doing this, because to me, this is really important for people to understand that there are people like yourself who dedicate decades of their life to doing this and to helping the public and to raising awareness. And all of us are doing this without any guidance, and we're breaking ground. And I love it. And so, Peter, what are you doing for New Year's Eve? Anything fun?
Probably not. Usually what I do is I watch the ball come down on TV, have a little champagne with my wife and kids, and go to bed. Not too exciting.
And so how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
And how old are they?
My son is 48, and my daughter is 44.
And have they said anything about your work in UFOs?
Oh, they used to attend the lectures. They would attend the conferences. My son is vaguely interested in the subject. My daughter, I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm not too sure that they believe what I believe, but they have an open mind, I think.
Well, it's interesting. I once, a few years ago, my daughter, who was in grade school at the time, she thinks her mother is, off her rocker for looking into this subject, but she ended up pranking the show. And it was so funny because my producer Tina kept saying, there's a person on the line and they're changing their name every time they call. And I just said, okay, well, let's just put this person through. And she came on the show with a spot-on English accent and proceeded to talk about these orange orbs that were over the San Francisco Bridge. And I just thought, I love it. Genetics. She might pretend like it's not rubbing off on her, but it clearly is, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, I guess the greatest service we can do for the young people is to open their mind and take in all the information and not be closed-minded about it,
Absolutely. I think there's so much going on around us, and for me, it's a sense of wonder, and I love the exploration process, and it's great to know you. So thank you, Peter Jeremiah, for being here. I hope that you all have a wonderful and safe New Year's. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Stick around for a great night on KCOR. Willie Miranda is up next with Dave Cook, and I will catch you next week. Nick Redfern will be here in my studio. So we'll see you then.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack